When you're choosing a camera shot, animated or live action, are you just thinking, what do I need to show? Or are you thinking about the emotional payoff that it's going to give? Most of us pick shots based on technical categories, establishing shot, medium, close-up. But shots aren't just technical, they're psychological. A camera angle can make a character feel powerful or small. A push-in can reveal a realization, and all of that can happen without a single word spoken. But how can you start picking shots like that when you're staring at a blank storyboard? It starts with recognizing the emotional storytelling behind common camera shots. In this video, I'll break down those storytelling patterns and show you how they impact the scene. And at the very end, I'll walk through the scene that inspired this whole video, a scene from Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. Because it doesn't just use one of these techniques, it uses four. Let's start with some basic shots. It's really fascinating how the camera uses these. It lets us, the viewer, have the experience of reading a character's inner dialogue or setting up the scene. It's all about showing, not telling. But what sort of shots are framing shots? What do angle shots do? What do they all communicate? There are four ways that the camera can influence how an audience feels, and each type of shot uses those effects in slightly different ways. There are framing shots, which is how close we are emotionally. There's angle shots, which is all about who has the power. There are focus shots, which tell us what matters right now. And finally, there are movement shots, which is about how the moment builds. Framing is all about how much of the scene your camera will show. In other words, what's in the camera frame. I'm going to be sharing some of the most common framing shots. I won't be sharing all of them because I think there's up to 10, which is a lot, but I'm definitely sharing one of my favorite, which is framing through objects. First up, one of the most common ones, establishing shot. This is normally the shot that is known as showing where your scene is taking place. It shows that it's in a house, a store, a room. That's the basic definition. Establishing shot equals location. But I think a better explanation is that establishing shot sets the scene. Let's take a look at the scene from Game Night. This isn't your typical establishing shot, but what I find is so fascinating about this, the way that they do this, is that they absolutely set the scene. Game Night is all about this couple absolutely loves games, and they think they are playing a game throughout most of the movie. And this established shot gives that game-like feeling with how everything looks like it's a toy. And all of this is about setting up the scene. Next up is medium shot. This is the shot where you see characters from the waist up. This is considered a neutral shot. By the way, if you hear me saying neutral or normal shot, it just means that the camera is acting like our eyes would. Because usually in movies, the camera is acting like our eyes and is giving us the best seat in the house, but they still give us a normal experience when it's called for. In the case of a medium shot, it's known as a normal shot because usually this would be the distance that we would stand from another person and that we'd be talking to them. An example of this would be The Incredibles. Usually a superhero movie is known for its action scene, but The Incredibles is no basic superhero movie. It's all about subverting the hero genre and pretty much putting the heroes in these normal lives. And in this scene, they use those normal shots to convey that this is a very mundane, normal life. Bob is just sitting in his office talking. This is a medium. This is also an example of they're just having a conversation in this scene. They're just talking. There is no action. The action only picks up when Bob starts getting into that superhero, I want to help you mode. And then you start getting into close-ups and cutting back and forth between them much more quicker. But speaking of close-ups, a close-up is a camera shot that focuses in on faces or details. Close-ups are all about pulling us into a character's emotional state, which in turn gives us a sense of how we're supposed to feel for them, what we should be experiencing ourselves. Let's take a look at the scene from Indiana Jones. He is dangling from this cliff here. You can see the relief on his face when we have shot A, which is a close-up shot of his face, that he grabbed this branch, he is now safe. But then in the next shot, we see the branch is slipping. Cut to shot B, which is another close-up shot of his face, and that is showing the desperation and then the resolve. This is a great example of how the close-up captures the emotion that we see and we're supposed to feel, and we understand what is at stake here for our character. Next, the extreme close-up. This is similar to the close-up, except extreme close-ups are usually screaming to us, this is what matters. And it usually sets up the idea that what it's focusing on is very important for the plot going forward. For example, in Inception, we are constantly being shown a close-up of the spinning top. The spinning top is crucial in Inception because it tells us whether we are in the mind and we're in this dreamlike reality, or if we are in reality if the top falls. The reason why extreme close-ups work, this is my opinion, is that as people, we rarely hyper-focus on something. So when the camera does that for us, we know instantly this is important. I need to pay attention. This next shot pulls us into the character's perspective. This is my favorite kind of shot. and this is framing through an object. What framing through an object is that you are putting the camera behind an object and you're looking through. You can see that the lens is obstructed by either branches, a window, something. It gives us that feeling that we are the ones looking through the object. It can set up all sorts of psychological storytelling. It can give us the sense that we are peering into something that we're not really supposed to see. It can give us a sense of tension. It can give us a sense of just that there's a barrier. In fact, in this example in Madagascar, Alex is floating away. They are very, very far from his friends, and all he can see is through this little hole in the box that he's in. And it makes us feel very closed off and claustrophobic. And it's so clear that we know that he wants his friends, but he can't get to them. This adds tension, this adds stakes. This makes us feel that we are trapped there right along with him. Thinking about all of these framing shots, it just puts me into the idea that shots by themselves are pretty boring. You only get the movie magic when you combine several framing shots to create a mini story, one that is filled with stakes. Here's a quick example from a scene of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. We have the establishing shot. This is where the two men enter the room and we get to see where everything is. And we get to see that she's not there. It sets the scene. I will also give kudos to the lighting because it definitely makes it feel very dark. There's already tension built with that candlelight. Next up, we have our medium shot, which shows us just how happy they are to be doing this, but also gives us enough to see both of their faces and that they're looking around the room. The next shot cuts to a close-up of Elizabeth's face. We get to see her terror, her fear, and just hoping that they don't find her. And the close-up also does the secondary job of giving us a clue that she is still in the room, but we don't know where. Then it cuts back to the medium shot of the two men. This is a non-verbal dialogue moment for the audience where they get to see if our villains are getting close to finding her. Cut back to Elizabeth. And this one is a medium to close shot because there's that zoom, but we're going to talk about zooms later in the movement section. Then the second to last shot is an extreme close-up of the medallion. We know that this medallion is very important to the plot. And if you've seen the movie, you'll know that just how important that medallion is to the whole plot. And then the last shot that also shows the scene is the framing through an object. We see that the eye of our villain is right in front of her and he is moments away from opening the door and discovering her. That's how framing works to create a powerful, memorable scene. That scene could have played out very differently if it had used angles. Camera angle means where is the camera looking from in order to create a power dynamic. If the camera is placed at eye level, it creates a neutral shot. But what if a camera is placed at a high angle? A high angle shot means that the camera is tilted down to look down on our subject. This tends to make the character look vulnerable in an almost underdog position. If you take a look at this shot from National Treasure, we see Ian looking down on Ben. Ben is stuck in that cave. Just from the angle alone, if you didn't know that Ian was up on top there and looking down, you could see that Ben is not in a position. The camera is looking down on him. He looks trapped. High angles are usually pretty subtle like this, but there is also an extreme version called a bird's eye view. And the reason why it's extreme is, well, let me play this scene and see if you can guess why it's extreme. This shot has no dialogue between characters, but even without it, we can tell the high stakes. This bird's eye view also gives us a sense of scale. But if there's a high angle, then there's also the concept of a low angle. And this is the next kind of camera shot. A low angle is literally the opposite of a high angle. That means the camera is tilted up and it puts the character in a position of power. In other words, they hold all the cards. In this example from Monsters University, though, that idea of what power is shown in a different sense. The camera is tilted up towards the scarers as they walk past, meaning that they are in power. But these scarers are not mob bosses, they're not terrorizing people, but it's showing us from a kid's perspective that these scarers who are being looked up to, they're idolized. And of course, there is also the extreme version of a low angle called a worm's eye view. That means that the camera is pointed nearly straight up. Sometimes it's even on the ground. In this example from The Lord of the Rings, from our worm's eye view, we can see that the Nazgul is seconds away from discovering them. They are literally right under. This shot clearly shows the dynamic of who is in power. This next angle is called a Dutch angle. And the reason why it is such a powerful storytelling tool is because instead of keeping the camera at the horizon line, the camera purposely tilts the horizon line. And in our minds as humans, when everything goes tilted sideways, we think something is off because that tilted angle looks unnatural to us. It makes us think that we are falling. Take a look at this shot and see if you can tell what it does for storytelling. This is an example from Batman 1989, a Tim Burton film. He is very much known as that eccentric director who will definitely use these Dutch angles. And in this movie especially, he uses them so much to create this sense of everything feels off. There's a lot of extreme angle in angle shots. Sometimes all you need is a small little shift in the angle to tell an entire power dynamic. As I was looking at Mozart's University for my high angle shot, I stumbled across this scene and I was just blown aback when I realized what they did. If you take a look at this scene, Mike gets off the bus. We see that the camera is at eye level. That means everything's neutral, everything's good, he's happy. There is no power dynamic. But then after the teacher tells everybody to pick a partner, we start seeing Mike from a high angle, which means that he is put in a vulnerable position. We know he is in trouble when it comes to partner picking. And as the partner picking happens, we see that he is left without anything. Then when he gets to the final possibility of having a fellow classmate as a partner, we switch to a higher angle than just the subtle shift that from before. And we know he's in extreme trouble. After all the partners are picked, the angle goes back to an eye level angle, saying that, okay, this part is done, and now we're going to keep moving on with the story. And this is just such a good example of camera setting up story and giving subtle, emotional, psychological storytelling. But on to the next types of shots. These are focus shots. This is showing us what matters. Or if you want a bad pun, this is what we should be focusing on. And the camera can do this with a few kinds of different shots. There is a shallow depth of field kind of shot. This is where the foreground is sharp and the background is blurred. While shallow depth of field, the emotional storytelling that it usually gives is that a character feels isolated. It doesn't always have to mean that they have to be isolated in a dark doom and gloom kind of set. For example, in Cinderella, the entire ballroom scene is very interesting. It tells a nonverbal story by using shallow depth of field. They do this by isolating their characters in a happy bubble. What this looks like is that when the prince sees Cinderella, he's shot in shallow depth of field. He only has eyes for her. Cinderella, on the other hand, she hasn't spotted him yet, but then as soon as she spots him, the background behind her becomes shallow depth of field. And that means she has entered this bubble with him. Then while they have their conversation, the depth of field stays shallow, showing that they really are in this isolated, happy bubble. In other words, it gives the sense they are the only two in the room. Next up is deep depth of field. Depth of field means that you can see everything. This kind of shot means that there is less emotional storytelling, but it's all about giving detail and context for the story. In Star Wars, when they are rescuing Princess Leia, there is this shot, and they are standing there with the stormtroopers firing at them. This deep depth of field shot gives us a sense of scales. It shows us there is nowhere for them to go. There is no doorways that they can turn into. They are literally trapped. And even though I don't think most people would consider a deep depth of field shot a normal shot, I would, because most of the time we see everything in detail. Unless you need glasses. The final kind of shot for focus is a rack focus shot. This is a very interesting one because it doesn't use only shallow depth of field and it doesn't only use deep depth of field. Rather, it switches. What this looks like is like the scene from Jurassic Park when the velociraptor is about to get the hunter. At first, we see that the hunter is ready and he is going to get his velociraptor. But then the focus shifts and it changes when we're looking. And we can see the velociraptor is coming out and the hunter has become the hunted. So that's pretty much what a rack focus shot is and where its emotional storytelling happens. It shifts the focus of what the viewer is supposed to be looking at because of what is more important in that moment. The movement shots. This is all about how you build up to a moment. Movement shots happens when the camera itself moves. Most of the time, cameras are placed stationary. It takes a lot of effort to move the camera. Starting to move the camera on purpose throws us into the moment as the viewer, and we get to experience it right there along with our characters. This is where we get into the zooms, and there's two of them. One is a pull-out, and the other is a push-in. The pull-out is when the camera zooms out of a scene. The whole storytelling purpose of a pull-out is that it gets to reveal more of the scene. Other times, it's about revealing the big picture. An example of a dramatic one is Lion King 1.5. There is this one scene in the beginning where Timon is showing where he grew up. And we have our reference point, which is Pride Rock, and then they do the pullout. This kind of shot shows how far away Timon's home is and where he wants to go. The exact opposite of a pullout is a push-in. This means the camera zooms in on the scene. It also means that we are pulled into the moment with the character and we're right there when the moment it clicks in our character's head that something has actually happened. And they connect the dots to whatever they're figuring out. One of the best examples I can share from cinema history is The Usual Suspects. If you haven't seen it and you like piecing together things and figuring out, highly recommend it. But in that case, don't watch the scene I'm about to show you. At the end, the detective realizes that he has been played. and lied to, and he connects all of these dots. It's a very interesting setup because at first he doesn't really realize that anything's wrong, but the camera pushes in for the first time, and we get the feeling that something isn't right. Then we get the final push in where everything just clicks. Another kind of movement shot would be a pan shot. This is when the camera moves either to left, to right, or sometimes 360. Panning shots tend to show discovery and the feeling of a moment that something has really built up and is moving towards something important. For instance, the Avengers, there's this shot in the New York battle where the camera pans around our heroes. It shows that they are gearing up, and it gives us the sense that there is a lot of high stakes. The last movement shot is tracking. Tracking is all about moving with the character and making the audience feel like they are discovering things with the character. Like this famous example from The Shining, when Danny is riding his tricycle through the hotel. We follow him, we see the hotel, we get the sense of foreboding, and we're right there when he discovers the door. There is one big difference in animation that I need to bring up about camera, and that is the camera isn't real. Everything I've already said about camera shots applies to animation too. That's why I've been sharing both live action and animated examples. But since the camera isn't real in animation, that means the camera isn't limited by reality, like it is in live action. Let's call the camera in animation the animation camera. This kind of camera allows animation to exaggerate, stylize, and get shots that a real camera could never get. I think one of my favorite all-time examples of animators having fun with the camera is in Duck Amuck. This is a Looney Tunes example. And in it, the animators absolutely play with the camera. They get to shrink the camera on Daffy. They get to bring the camera really close, really far away. They get to make it appear like there's different kinds of frames. They pretty much have a lot of fun. This obviously isn't the only example that you can find in animation. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse will give you exaggerated camera movements that you can't get in live action. Now we're up to the final part. Which of these shots get used in Wake Up, Dead Man, A Knives Out Mystery? Keep in mind, this shot inspired the whole video. To me, it is very cinematic, even though it probably will not go down in cinema history. Let's see if you can guess all 4 techniques that were used here. Did you catch it? Let me break this down. First technique, this is an eye level shot. Usually eye level shots are neutral shots, but in this case, it's giving us a sense that we are right there with him. The next technique that we see here is that this is a shallow depth of field. We are isolated. We are in this moment with him, and his whole world is collapsing around him. The third technique that they use here is that it's a close-up shot, which means we get to see all the emotions playing on his face. And it's a high-stakes situation right now. He is a suspect. He is wanted, but he didn't do it. And the last technique that they use is rack focus. They start off on focusing on him, but then they switch focus to the door behind him, showing where our hero comes in, our detective who is going to make sure that his name is clear. There are many moments like this sprinkled throughout movies, throughout cinematic history. This is just one that stood out and probably will not actually be a cinematic moment in years to come. But if you have a favorite example like this from a famous movie or not, can you share it in the comments? I'd love to read about it. And maybe it'll inspire more people to ask, what is this shot showing me instead of telling?